how might we be able to provide that learning so that they can access it anytime, any place in a cost-effective way? What if we created a space? What if we created a space where we could take some of that learning and get it down to some sort of bite-sized modules and then distribute them using a platform so that they could be accessed at any time by staff. Now, we have some secret sauce in the Upper Grand, and you noticed right away when you came for a visit.
Welcome to another episode of Education Matters. My guest today is Peter Sovran, Director of Education for the Upper Grand District School Board and one of Ontario's most experienced educational leaders. Today's episode is a little different. For the first time, Education Matters was recorded on location inside Upper Grand's Innovation Lab, which is a remarkable space designed to rethink professional learning at scale. Most school districts build professional development programs, but Upper Grand built a professional learning lab. Imagine a school district creating its own studio where educators can develop, record, share, and revisit high-quality professional learning whenever and wherever they need it. Part production studio, part learning hub, and part experiment in continuous improvement. The Innovation Lab is one of the most creative responses I've seen to the challenge that every district faces in supporting thousands of educators in meaningful ways without extra costs or pulling them away from the students they serve. And I think Peter is the exact kind of leader we need leading school districts right now. He's thoughtful, methodical, optimistic, and deeply grounded in the realities of public education. His journey from neuroscience researcher to teacher, principal, ministry leader, and ultimately to director of education, and his commitment to human connection in an age increasingly shaped by AI really made for a fascinating conversation. In our discussion, Peter shares the story behind the lab, what he learned from some of Ontario's most influential education leaders, his perspectives on AI, and why he truly believes the future of education depends on strengthening the relationships at the heart of learning. If you are listening to this only on an audio feed, I strongly encourage you to check out the recording on the YouTube channel, where we've spliced in videos and images from our time at the lab so you can get a more tangible sense of what it looks like and feels like. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy my discussion with Peter Sovran. Okay, Peter Sovran, well, thank you for joining on this podcast, and more to that, thank you for having me on site. I think this is the first official podcast we've ever done on site at a school district. So thanks for having us and welcoming us into this awesome innovation lab.
Yeah, well, welcome, Jason. Glad to have you here.
Well, we'll come back for sure to the Innovation Lab, because when you toured me around and talked to me about the impetus of this lab and how we got here and what it serves, I truly view it as one of the most innovative endeavors I've seen a school district take, and I definitely want to talk about that. But in the spirit of the podcast, I always want the audience to learn a little bit about the guest. So can you start by telling us where and when did you grow up?
Yeah. So it all began, like it does for all of us, with my parents. My parents came from a small town in northern Italy, about 30 minutes north of Venice, and settled in the Toronto area. And I came to learn later on, really in life, that for the first 4 years, I spoke Italian in the home, and went to school with, very limited English. But because my parents had settled in a community, much like many newcomers do with others who also spoke the language, there was a familiarity there. Community, the friends that you'd hang out with after school and so on. But the one thing that I will say about growing up in our household, my parents always placed really great importance on making sure whatever you do it at your very, very best. We would say, we would translate that in our education language as setting really high expectations. Always set high expectations. My dad was a bricklayer. My mom worked from home as a seamstress, and both took enormous pride in their crafts and the work they did. And I believe that I've carried that through in my career, and what I like to see as I go visit classrooms, throughout the district.
So we have that in common. I think we've connected on this before, but I don't know if I told you the story. I think my English was a little bit better by the time I started kindergarten, but I distinctly remember, and this might date me a bit, I got spanked in kindergarten by my kindergarten teacher because I misunderstood what she was saying. I didn't translate it properly. But you had that experience of entering the system as English as a second language learning student. What was that like? Like, I know you probably, like a lot of Italians, had that community around you outside of the school. But do you have any distinct memories of sort of early learning and what you love to learn, and maybe what some of the challenges were for you as you're going through the system?
Yeah, for sure. I know for sure. I didn't have that experience,
You didn't
Jason.
get spanked.
I may have spent a few recesses, looking at a wall, because perhaps when I was engaging in sports, which I've always enjoyed, perhaps I had a few disagreements, let's say, on the pitch. Yes, yeah, but I'd say right from an early day, I definitely had an affinity for math and for science, and that's what I pursued in my undergraduate studies. And then, interestingly enough, my initial path was not to become a K-12 educator, but in fact, I'd moved from an undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto to a PhD program in behavioral neuroscience at McGill. And that was the pathway. The pathway was to, do research and, maybe a professorship, until I learned that as I was running the experiments, which really entailed, having rats run through mazes, that I am very, very, very allergic to rats. And so if you ever think you have a rat issue, just invite me over, and within a few minutes, I will, struggle with my breathing.
You'll be able to
break out
tell
in
them.
hives, and you'll know that you actually have a rat problem. But because of that, I had to make a decision: continue with the PhD, or move into another area. And I had an aunt in Italy who was an elementary school teacher, an uncle here in Canada who was a high school math science teacher, and then later on went into becoming a vice principal. And I really sought their counsel. And it was through their encouragement, actually, that I pursued a faculty of education opportunity, and that's what landed me in K-12 education.
I'm sorry I was laughing so hard, but that's a tough way to have a career pivot, right? Is to realize the kind of experiment, you're literally allergic to the experiments you wanted.
Absolutely, but I'll say this: that was a long time ago, and I would say that that entire spirit of doing research, of always looking for answers, always striving for that continuous improvement. That's really what scientific research is all about. I've carried that through my whole career. I would say, even in the work that I do today, it involves that notion of seeking answers to questions, always trying to ask better questions, experimenting, if you will, in obviously a very safe way, but always looking for, well, what if we tried this?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the kind of a work ethic that your parents must have instilled in you. I'm always very interested in stories like yours where you have an immigrant experience, but unlike mine, your parents weren't educated. Was that something they prioritized for, like they really, because they weren't educated, wanted to ensure that you and your siblings were educated?
Yeah, Jason, you often hear in stories like of my family where the parents said, we didn't have an education, so you have to have an education. I think that was there, but what really stood out for me again was the work ethic, the really high expectations, and I translated that into my school studies, my athletic interests. But that was really the core of their, I think, their value system and their ongoing messaging. I would say that with growing up in our household, I started to realize that while my parents didn't have a formal education, the equivalent of here in Canada, which would have meant a high school diploma, um, I never wondered, if they were able to, read or do math, because they always did. I would watch my dad read, an English language newspaper, an Italian newspaper. Our conversations always centered around current events, politics, and it was my father primarily who would be interested and supported me with my math homework from an early age. It wasn't until later when I went back and I visited Italy, spent some time in the schools there, that I realized they never made it to the equivalent of our high school, and yet they had a tremendous foundational base in literacy and in math.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to the kind of parents you had and the kind of folks that raised you. So, you were really influenced, it sounds like, by extended family to go into education. What was your actual teaching journey like? You started teaching high school?
I did.
Sciences?
I started in the early 90s. And for those who might remember the Ontario context in the early 90s, it was difficult to get a job. I was very fortunate while I was initially trained as a high school math and science teacher. My first job was actually in an elementary school. In fact, it was one of the elementary schools that I attended. It was back then, a grade 7 and 8 school, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. But, my teaching days varied from elementary school to high school, from doing summer school to, doing night school, teaching adults. And I even did a short stint covering for a kindergarten teacher. And let me tell you, you really do learn a whole lot when you cover a kindergarten class for an hour a day.
I worked in daycares and Montessori schools for a good chunk of my my university days, and let me tell you, that's where you develop the patience of a saint. I don't know if I ever got to that level, but I can certainly respect that. So then, take me through, how did you get interested in administration? I imagine you were a principal, vice principal, and principal.
Yeah, that usual pathway, I would say, except I took a slight detour. And while I was a teacher in Toronto, an opportunity arose, again, through my work with the Science Teachers Association of Ontario. There was an opportunity to work with the Ontario Ministry of Education. And as often happens, one thing led to another. There was a short opportunity in working with the government, and 6.5 years later, I was still there. I had left the school board. I had become an Ontario servant. I became a senior policy advisor, and then moved into management in the Ontario government, and oversaw at that time strategies in Ontario focused on early reading and early math. From there, I took on a principalship in the York Region District School Board. It's where I got to know Bill Hogarth, who's well known, I'm sure, to to yourself and to your listeners. Uh, and and then another opportunity arose to sort of marry some of the interests that I had at that time, which was focused on e-learning. And so I returned to the Ontario government, ran eLearning Ontario for about 4 years. A wonderful opportunity, again, working with folks from right across the province. And even back then, it was one of the first times where it was we had staff who were in different pockets of the province and working remotely. Before, working remotely was something that people did. And it was a great learning experience, a wonderful leadership experience. From there, I moved on to being a superintendent of education, an associate director of education in Hamilton. And then, fortunately, an opportunity came up. I was a successful candidate for the position that I currently hold here in the Upper Grand as the director of education and CEO. And it's been 5 amazing, wonderful years.
Well, I want to bring this all back to the innovation lab here because that entire trajectory, I think, is partly what allowed you to envision something like this and put something like this into practice. But I haven't had a lot of senior leaders who have been part of the ministry first, then in a district role. Can you talk about any of your part or stints with the ministry and in management leadership there that you really learn from and bring to bear in your role now as a director?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I really enjoy speaking about this because working inside of government, I had the opportunity to work and be mentored by some absolutely amazing leaders. For your listeners, and certainly in Ontario, and probably more broadly, would know our former Deputy Minister of Education, Nancy Naylor, who was one of my first mentors in my early days. And then I especially like to acknowledge the mentorship and leadership that I received from Marie-Lison Fougère, who also recently retired as a deputy minister. I'd say she taught me everything I know about policy. That stayed with me, and I've carried that in all of the leadership roles that I've had in districts. Really understanding in terms of broad social policy and the importance of it and the impacts, and just as importantly, what it means to then translate policy and put it into action.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So you have this broad view in working from the ministry, right? Because that's what I find really unique about it is you're not focused on one locale, one district, one area, one school, but you're looking at education across the entire province. When it came to thinking about what you would do differently as a director here in Upper Grand, what are some of the first things that you wanted to bring that perspective to bear now in a local jurisdiction serving a very specific community?
Yeah. So let me start by saying when I arrived at Upper Grand, I had a wonderful opportunity to spend about 4 months transitioning with the then director of education, the late Martha Rogers, and one of the legends for sure. And what an opportunity to be able to transition with her, speak with her, not only just before I began the role, but within the first few months. And then sadly, she left us way too soon. But I really felt that those months that I had together with her, getting to learn so much about district, spending time in the district, I very quickly became just enamored with the folks here in the Upper Grand, the amazing staff that's here. And so while we've done great things, including the Innovation Lab, that's all on this solid foundation that I was fortunate to be able to lift off from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the famous quote of standing on the shoulders of giants. And for those folks listening that don't know the work and the personality that Martha was, I encourage you to just look up any videos of her online. She was just an amazing leader, amazing human being. So that's amazing that you acknowledged her and the work and the foundation she set up. So now let's turn to the innovation lab. What was the impetus? Can you give us the origin story of what this is? And actually, maybe let's start by describing its function, and then we can get back to the story. Because of the folks watching, and by the way, this is a podcast that should be watched as well, because what we're going to do is also splice some videos of the space and when some of the capacities of it into the video. But for those listening, can you kind of describe the space we're in?
Sure. So let me begin by unpacking just the title, Innovation Lab. We insist on it being referred to as a lab. And again, I'll tie this back to those researcher days. This is a place where we very much want to explore, ask questions, and test things out. That's why we've really adhered to the word lab. Now, innovation, because this is a place where we want to look at how might we do things differently. And professional learning is definitely one of the areas where we wanted to explore different ways to reach all of our staff, our teaching staff, others who work in our schools, but broadly, we have approximately 7,000 individuals in the Upper Grand who are employed, either on a full-time basis, a part-time basis, but 7,000 individuals. And I always like to use that word, 7,000 individuals, as opposed to, we have 4,000 full-time equivalents. These are 7,000 roughly individuals, all of whom have varying professional learning needs, interests. How do we reach them all in a way that allows them to really dial in when they want, how they want, and for as many times as they want? One of the things that we know and we hear from individuals who undertake professional learning opportunities is that, I really wanted to ask that question, but I didn't want to ask that question in front of my peers. Or that was a wonderful opportunity in coming together, and I really appreciated the camaraderie of colleagues. But I missed a piece, and I wanted to revisit that piece of the learning. So we took all of that and we thought, why don't we create a space where we can, as easily as possible and as cost effective as possible, create those professional learning opportunities and then allow all of our staff to access it at their own time, on their own will and volition, in terms of how many times they want to come back to it. And that was really sort of the origins, let's say, of the lab. But I do have a story for you when it comes to the actual lab inspiration. And so I was at a session with colleagues from across the country. We were in Ottawa, and it was spring of 2022. And there was a keynote speaker, a series of keynote speakers, and the topic was micro-credentialing and blockchains. Mm-hmm. Now you might think, what do blockchains and micro-credentialing have to do with an innovation lab in a school district in Ontario? Well, as I was listening, I was sending messages back to our senior team, and I've since come to learn that they would call these Peter Nuggets. They would come back as Peter Nuggets. We'll leave that for later. It was just, hey, I'm watching this and hearing this keynote, um, trying to connect a few of the dots. We've been talking about professional learning. We've been talking about perhaps some of the challenges that we all face with being able to, release staff from their classroom responsibilities to, provide that professional learning. But really, it's how might we be able to provide that learning so that they can access it anytime, any place in a cost-effective way? And so that notion of micro credentialing was, what if we created a space? What if we created a space where we could take some of that learning and get it down to some sort of bite-sized modules, and then distribute them using a platform so that they could be accessed at any time by staff. So that was really sort of the origins of it. Now, we have some secret sauce in the Upper Grand, and you noticed right away when you came for a visit. This whole idea of putting together a space where this could be done wouldn't be possible if you didn't have at least one individual who knew all of the magic behind video, audio, stitching it all together. And we have that individual, Ron Birdie, who you met, who is a professional in the area of sound engineering, and is just brilliant at putting this together. So here was the challenge: when that Peter Nugget came back to the senior team, there was a wondering, might Ron be able to help us and create a space where we could do this work? And so, up for the challenge, Ron spent the next couple of months while he was doing, his other work, and came back with version number 1 of the Innovation Lab, what we call the Innovation Lab sort of creation studio. And what you will see in the tour, in the snippets of the lab, is the current version. I always joke with Ron. I come in typically on Fridays into this building, and first thing I do is I pop into the lab and I say, "Hey, Ron, what's new since the last time I was here?" Which was just a week ago. And there's always something new. So I think we're on version 30 something now of the various tweaks that Ron has made. But in roughly February of 2023, version number 1 of the Innovation Lab that Ron had put together with a number of folks from our program services staff, was launched. And the idea was, again, professional learning done in a way that's cost effective, which means that we couldn't have a whole production team filming and doing audio. So Ron created a lab which is much like going to the self-checkout at a grocery store. It's intuitive for the user. And so we have staff in our program services, and in fact, staff right across our district. And we've invited, guests from other districts and other partners in the community and whatnot. You can come into this lab, and you've tried it yourself, Jason, and with really a push of a button, you can start recording high quality video with high quality audio. The lighting is all done automatically, and it's captured and then it's put into post-production. And instead of having post-production be something that we'd have to train everybody on, Ron is the supervisor for some absolutely magnificent co-op students who are doing, 2 and 4 credit co-ops in post-production. And so they're learning real life skills in this space, creating the post-production. And that's how we end up with our professional learning modules in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so much to unpack here. I want to make sure the audience, in addition to the visuals, gets a sense of what's going on here. So first, let me say, when I when you gave me a tour and I went back to my team, we have a term for how simple things are to use. It's called J-proofing. So despite how good my podcast looks and sounds, I have zero technical capability. It's all Andrew, who's been here working with Ron, and a huge shout out to both of them for getting us set up in this great space and having it look and sound the way it does. But when I came the first time, not only did Ron show me how everything was J-proofed, that you could press a button and record it, but there were so many different modalities, if I could use that term, in terms of how teachers can use the tech in this space to teach other teachers great practices. So you have whiteboards that are filmed and recorded. You have overhead cameras that can show a teacher working out a problem. You have the ability to show different manipulatives and how those can be used in the classroom. And all of this is modular, all of this with little help from Ron in terms of getting set up. I guess your middle management staff, or your PD staff, I should call it, are able to come in here and to produce very high quality videos that are like at the point of instruction, we're meeting other teachers where they are.
Yeah.
Anything I missed there that
you've really captured it. And we have, again, in the spirit of experimentation, it's been our staff who've been in our program services, instructional leaders, but then we've opened it up to others. We had a series of really small vignettes that were done by a classroom teacher who wanted to reach parents and explain this math kit that was being sent home. So she drove over one day, booked out the lab on her own, worked her way through the different setups, the different stations available here in the lab, created a series of really small videos that were very personable, very connected to, the families that she was looking to reach in her school. And in one take, I would say, in a short period of time, had a whole series of informative, videos that she made available to all of the parents. Actually, it was genius having seen this. The math kids went home with a little QR code. Parents just scanned the QR code, took them to the site, and there it is. Now, I always say that, the material that's created in here, if you're looking for, Hollywood North quality production, that's not where you're going to get, because that would entail a whole crew, exact scripting, many, many, many days, probably even weeks of putting it all together. But what you will get here is professional learning that is authentic, because it's folks from the district, done in a lab that produces really high quality audio, visual, and it's put together in a post-production so that it's comfortable to view and interact with. We're not looking to, receive a Gemini award.
That's right. Right. I mean, but the quality is great. And then, I mean, I love the fact too that you have students here and you're using the lab not only to serve your teachers, but also students, where they're able to come in and get experience in areas that I'm sure you have a waiting list of students trying to get into the lab and to do this kind of work.
It's always great to pop in on Fridays and, go say hello to our students who are undertaking their co-op placement. Brilliant, energetic, engaged. And, when I asked them, are you enjoying this? and they're just beaming because this is what I really love to do, and what a great opportunity, and to be able to do it, and knowing that you're giving back to your own school board in terms of the post-production material. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. But let me tell you, Jason, another time we had students in the lab, one of the early versions of the lab, and very much in the spirit of wanting the professional learning to be as authentic as possible. And so the team brought in some really young learners. I think they were grade 1. And it was probably, June. The building has got a little bit of age to it. So, temperature control maybe isn't exactly where it could be. So you've got a bit of a picture now. You've got a fairly warm June humid day, and you have a number of 6 and 7-year-olds who've now, come on a school bus away from their school, and they're in the lab. But the team thought, let's capture some lessons done, for literacy and for math with these young students. I think they even provided them with some ice cream. That's the last time we had really young students in the lab. Not an environment conducive to young people being in here, and so while the idea was absolutely a great one, the location, the structure itself, probably wasn't aligned as well with being able to see the students in their natural environment. Ron, in his brilliance, again working with our program services team, well, if the students can't come here, let's go to them. And so that was one of the outcrops of yet another experiment, is a sort of mobile lab that then moves into classrooms for some filming and some capturing of, lessons, really authentic lessons that are done in actual classrooms with actual teachers, with actual students. And, that's all part of it. Wasn't part of the initial thinking of the lab and the professional learning, but there's another example of how it's just evolved through the different experiments.
Well, and that's super powerful for teachers, right? Part of the problem with traditional Pro-D is it's abstracted from the context of teaching and learning with actual students. So that's an amazing iteration on bringing the lab to folks so teachers can actually see the learning in action. But one of the other things I found fascinating was now how you bring all of this learning to teachers, right? So now you've developed a lot of amazing content, which obviously in your context is customized to your, like your parent communities. You mentioned that parents that started working with parents, the way you teach literacy and the things you emphasize when it comes to numeracy. So it's as customized as you can get for how you want the learning to happen in your district, but then you disseminate it also in I think a very smart way. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So the work that's done in the lab, first and foremost, is connected to our multi-year strategic plan. And at the core of our multi-year strategic plan is foundational education and student achievement. And we actively, translate that multi-year strategic plan into a set of actions, measurable actions. We refer to it as our Let's Go methodology, goals and key outcomes. And in our elementary schools, the goals are really keenly focused on developing those foundational literacy and those foundational math skills. Not that other areas are not as important. It's just foundationally having really strong literacy skills and really solid math skills is critical, very critical. And in our high schools, those goals and key outcomes, again, still focused on literacy and math, but our expectation is that every time a student signs up for a class, they will be successful in that class. They will attain their credit in that class, and they will, be successful in really finding their path as they leave high school. So the professional learning that happens in the lab needs to be connected to that. If our expectation is that this will be our focus, and this is what we're supporting, this is what we're measuring across the entire district, then the professional learning should be also geared to that. And so very early on, we developed a series which we called the Essentials. We began with grade 3. And grade 9. Again, here in Ontario, those who are listening would be familiar with, those are grades where there is a provincial assessment as well. And the Essentials began very much with literacy and math. And so let's unpack what are some of the core essentials in terms of instruction, in terms of assessment, in terms of classroom setup. And all of those are available now to our educators and all of our staff across the UGDSB. And they can access it 24/7, 365, because everything that's created in the lab, again, that notion of a micro module, nothing is greater than about 3 to 5 minutes in terms of the video clip. It's wrapped around with other content, questions or examples, and that's available through the same platform that is available for delivering e-learning across our district. And so teachers simply, or any staff member, can log in, access the material whenever they want. And again, going back to what we've heard from staff right across the district, I've attended that learning session, really liked it. I wish I could revisit that one concept. Well, with these modules, they're able to do that as many times as they want, from where they want and at what time of the day they want to do it.
Amazing. And why I was so adamant about not only sharing the story, but doing it here and allowing folks some tangibility, so to speak, or at least some visualization of what's happening, is that delivering Pro-D at scale is extraordinarily tough. You mentioned there's teacher shortages. You have a lot of onboarding of new teachers coming in. The release time is very cost prohibitive to get everyone this education, or to get them the support they need in their education. And so this is just, I think, the most innovative model I've come across the country. And I know you are such a gracious host and want to talk about the work you've done here, because I know it's also a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and experimentation, I think is probably the proper term, that you can probably save a lot of other districts in terms of how they're thinking about their PD models and being more innovative and cost effective. But if I can ask you now to turn to sort of the elephant in the room in education now, which is artificial intelligence. It's upending so much, and for better and for worse, of our traditional models of education, our traditional pedagogy. How are you thinking about AI writ large? And then if you want to get into specifics of anything that you're doing on the ground.
Yeah, all the work we do, every time we start a session, we always begin with that visual of our multi-year strategic plan. And, that sort of that bullseye right in the middle of foundational education and student achievement, connected with our other key priorities. And so when we started looking at AI and the impact of AI, we really started to focus in on creating an AI literacy framework. And that framework here in the UGDSB sort of dials it back to, so what do we think are some of the necessary skills, knowledge that our our students and frankly our staff need in terms of engaging with AI, be it generative AI, agentic AI, or honestly, what else is coming. And so our AI literacy at UGDSB focuses on having, no surprise, really strong literacy skills, exceptional foundation in math, because those are two core areas that engaging with AI, understanding how AI works, being able to understand how to safely engage with AI, are really connected to having those strong literacy and those strong math skills. But the other two foundational areas that we've been focused on that we believe are critical for an AI literacy are an understanding and a practice of human rights. It's pretty difficult to have a conversation around bias and ethics without actually grounding it in an understanding of basic human rights. And the fourth, which is connected to one of our priorities in our multi-year strategic plan, is around sustainability. And so being able to have that conversation, raise those really important issues with students, even really young students, so that as they engage with AI tools, we help them understand how the AI tools are actually working and potentially some of the broader impacts that they may have. So it's not just, well, this thing really performs some great magic, because it's not magic. And we want our students to understand that.
Great probability is what it does. Yeah. So because I know our time is relatively short here, because I can talk about this lab and AI all day. But if I can ask you to kind of look to the future of education, and I know it's hard now with AI and the rapid rate of change. It's mind-boggling as someone in the space, learning it and teaching it all the time. It really is mind-boggling. But if I can ask you to look, let's say a 10-year to 20-year horizon in education. Let me ask this question two ways. If we get it right, what does it look like? And if we get it wrong, what does it look like? Maybe start on the negative side, and we'll end on the a more utopian vision of education.
I've thought about this a lot, and I'm so proud of the work that our team has done in this space by being really thoughtful and sort of methodical and listening to students first and foremost. And what we've heard from students is that coming to school is about the human interaction. And where students are engaged, like the co-op students here in the innovation lab, they're engaged at a human level. And if we get it right, I'm going to start with the positive. I always like starting with a positive. If we get it right, that human-centered piece will even be stronger. Doesn't matter what time horizon we give it. Give it a year, 10, 20, it doesn't matter. That human-centered piece will always be at the core. And so I'm going to connect it back to the work that we're continuing to do here in the lab, the professional learning. Our intent was never to replace the human-to-human contact, even when it comes to professional learning, but rather to augment it, to give individuals the opportunity to learn at their own pace, at their own time, when they want, how they want. But then when there's an opportunity to come together with other folks, that opportunity is really to make that human connection. So whether it's Gen AI, agentic AI, or other amazing innovations, because I really do think that these innovations have the sheer potential of being transformative of saving time. But that time has to then be translated back into the human connection. There's nothing more magical than walking into a classroom and seeing the interaction between the adult in the room, be it a teacher, educational assistant, another professional, and a student, regardless of age. That's the magic. Magic happens right there. If we can augment that with efficiencies, if we can augment that by having, AI technologies be a further supporter of learning, absolutely amazing.
The future's open-ended at that point. Okay, so if I can ask you now, what worries you? What worries you either structurally or even culturally? Because we tend to think, or when people say the walled garden of education, of course, it's not a walled garden, and what's happening in broader society and the societal shifts that are happening now at crazy rapid rates, I should say, impact families, impact teachers, impact the classroom. So what are the things that worry you that other leaders should be thinking about?
I'm going to take this right back to sort of where we began. And so if we set high expectations all the time, then we should always be striving to improve, because those two go hand in hand. In order to improve, you need to experiment a bit in a safe, in a controlled way. And that's why we created the lab. The lab is partly professional learning, ultra studio, and partly just a space for the collision of ideas, so that we can, test things out in the spirit of continuously improving. So what worries me is stagnation. What worries me is a culture of perhaps, putting one's head in the sand and hoping that everything around just goes back to the way it was. And so if we truly have a high expectations, if we truly want to continue to innovate and improve, then we can't be stagnant. That doesn't mean being reckless either, because that worries me also. Flavor of the day.
Yeah, let a bunch of AI agents loose.
Let's not do flavor of the day. We have a much greater responsibility than that. Recently, there's been a lot of renewed conversation around the impacts of social media on young people. And I think we have a lot to learn from what we didn't do in K-12 education during that time, and what we have an opportunity to do now with AI.
I couldn't agree more. So my penultimate question: you've had the ministry purview. You're director of an awesome school board. If you were king of education for a day, you're more powerful than the minister. You are all powerful. What are some of the things you would do?
Wow, that's an amazing question, and one that I don't think I'm equipped to answer, Jason.
Well, I mean, you can start with where I would start is add billions, if not trillions, of dollars to education nationally. But I want you to go wherever you think that would take you. The reason I asked the question is because I do feel, in education in particular, of course this happens in other fields, that we get so sequestered, our thinking becomes so sequestered by the realm of the possible, that we think because budgets are what they are, we can only imagine a renewed education system within these limits. And my firm belief is there's no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to look at what's going on and to be open to possibilities. So I asked the question to give folks the opportunity to talk about, again, that vision of a utopian education. What are the things that we could do if, what I often believe are imaginary barriers are removed?
Yeah. Let me frame it this way. If I had a magic wand, I would wave it so that each and every student, regardless of which school they attend, regardless of where they are, is successful, felt confident, felt like they belonged, because that, to me, is the power of public education. And for centuries, we've seen the benefits, and to this day, we continue to know that there are students who haven't had that level of success. And so find me that magic wand. I'll take it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, democracies depend on exactly what you just outlined. So I think that's a wonderful answer. Okay, the last question, as always, what book, album, podcast, other than Education Matters, would you recommend to the audience? What's some interesting content, some good authors, singers, thinkers that you've been consuming lately that you want to share with other folks?
Yeah. So like probably so many, I've become a huge fan of Hard Fork. It's that blend of, really interesting journalism on, the topics of technology, primarily AI. And so I've been known occasionally to send off to, our senior team, hey, have you listened to the latest podcast? Books. Oh, there are so many of them. There are so many, and the one that I keep going back to is, and it's really been the sort of the cornerstone of our Let's Go approach, and that's Measure What Matters. We keep and I say we because our whole senior team just, keeps diving into it. And we keep rereading it and rereading it and rereading it and applying it to our context. So sorry to disappoint that I'm not giving, the latest, on the bestseller list. Gives you a little window into sort of how I operate, which is it's not a one and done. Let's keep going back. There are so many great examples to draw from when you have a really good knowledge base.
Quality over currency.
Quality over currency. Yes.
Thank you so much for this. Thank you to you, the staff, Ron in particular.
Well, you're welcome back anytime, and hopefully you'll take us up on the offer and do more podcasts from here.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.